FTC. This video will go over what state machines are, how they are implemented, examples of state machines in FTC, and real-world applications of state machines. First, what are state machines? A state machine is an abstract model of a step-by-step process. This model consists of a collection of states and transitions between those states. In relation to coding, a state machine helps us account for all necessary steps to have a working program. Later, we'll show a couple of examples of what state machines look like. This state machine has 3 states and always cycles back to the start.
Second, let's talk about the implementation of state machines. This is pseudocode for a robot's arm. As you can see, it uses a state variable to organize the code and account for any possibilities of user input, like if they press or unpress a button that controls this arm. In robotics, we often need to implement concurrency. We do this using cyclic programming. Methods for each section of software run in a 20 millisecond loop due to variable delay, which is 20 milliseconds. The variable delay counts for the time that has passed from the start to the end of the methods and subtracts the time skipped so that the CPU is shared. Each function, chassis, pickup, shooter, and grabber, can be implemented as a state machine, keeping track of its state using a private variable. The variable delay is demonstrated through this piece of pseudocode, where ARM runs and the 20 millisecond sleep statement is placed. It's important to note these 4 things when implementing and using it on your robot. Initialize the states to their initial versions when restarting or rebooting the robot. Test mechanisms and servos when initializing. Reset mechanisms to their original positions. And reset encoder and gyro values. Adding a status check to your code by returning error or working normally would be beneficial to see if the code is working properly. If a code returns error, for example in this pseudocode, an arm would simply stop moving to minimize any potential damage. During the autonomous period, one way to implement cycles is by emulating the gamepad. This means that the computer acts as if it was a controller, so it can perform controller-like tasks.
Third, we'll explain previous FTC state machines from previous games. In the 2021 to 2022 FTC season, Team Koalatronic designed a carousel spinner that spun ducks off of its carousel. Its axle was spun and powered by a core hex motor. This is the state machine for a robot arm. At state 0, its power is set to 0, meaning it isn't moving. The button is then unpressed, but when it is pressed, it goes to state 1, where it suddenly has power and is moving. If the encoder count is greater or equal to 562, the arm has reached its max and cannot move any further, so its power is set to 0 at state 2. But the button is still pressed there. When the button becomes unpressed, it goes to state 3 and moves in a reverse direction. The state machine goes to state 3 from either state 1 or state 2. Whenever the button becomes unpressed at state 3, if the encoder count isn't less than or equal to 75, it will set its power to 0 and stop moving. This brings it back to state 0, the initial position. This is a diagram of how a linear slide mechanism works. Its default position, or state 0, is the carry position, where no buttons are pressed. When different buttons are pressed on the remote controller, the linear slide will move up and down to different heights.
Fourth, here are some real-world applications of state machines. This is a state machine of a vending machine. Starting at state 0, it is at its default state, where snacks are loaded and ready to be purchased with no one using the vending machine. If the user types in an invalid code for an item, the machine will allow another try for the user. If the user types a valid code for an item, the machine will save the input and be ready for the user to enter money. If the user enters not enough money, the machine will give the money back and allow the user to try again. If the vending machine sees that the user has inserted enough money to purchase the item, the food will fall out of the vending machine and give change back if necessary. The vending machine will then reset to default or state 0. This has been an introduction to state machines. Hope you enjoyed.